Good evening. Making sure this is on. Everyone hear me? We were messing with the microphones earlier. Let's call the Planning Commission meeting of Monday, January 22nd to order.
Okay.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Barnes.
Here.
Commissioner Urbani.
Here.
Commissioner Chorin.
Here.
Commissioner Hawley.
Here.
Commissioner Gentes.
Here.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Here.
Commissioner Stoker. Here. Alderman Stralchuk.
Here.
Mayor Nurbin.
Here. First up is approval of the minutes from December 4th.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or corrections? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. First up, we have two items on consent. Mastech Network Solutions for AT&T Mobility for a generator, for a backup generator for a cell phone tower, and Plunkett Rayish Architects for Lumen Christi Parish. Would anyone like to vote on these as a whole, or would anyone like an item removed? Commissioner Schaefer.
I just wanted to confirm that no, just because Lumen Christi in the past has been a topic that has generated interest from the community when they add on, because I think that there's oftentimes people in that area have experienced some water issues. So because there's a bit of a crowd, just making sure that there's no one here that wanted to speak about that. I was surprised it was on the consent agenda, just for that reason.
Since they're trading one form of impervious surface for another, that's why it's on consent. They're not really adding. But if there's anyone here that wishes to speak or comment, we could definitely pull it off if there's interest. Otherwise, we won't. Commissioner Chorin.
With regards to the cell tower, I think the staff brought up an issue that needs to be discussed. Will that be brought forward in this discussion?
Not unless we pull it off and discuss. Sounds like we want to take them up separately. All right. So we'll do this the hard way. That's okay. We've got time. Let's take up item 2A first, Mastech Network Solutions for AT&T Mobility. Applicant seeking a minor request to allow for a backup generator with block wall expansion for the property located at 10448 Northport Washington Road. Would we like to address the one issue staff brought up? I think it's with regard to the enclosure door.
Oh. Yeah, on the conditions in the report, after going to the site, we noticed that the gate for the proposed enclosure, or the existing enclosure, was kind of a metal material, whereas the proposed one is wood, so we just wanted to make sure those match by making sure that the existing one would get a wood gate as well.
So are we asking them to make them both metal or both wood, or just
Both wood.
mat? Both wood. I'm assuming that's how we wrote up the conditions.
Correct.
So would the applicant like to speak on that matter? Are they not here? I guess if we vote on it straight up, they're going to get that as a condition. I'm not seeing anyone from the applicant side wishing to speak. Do you have a particular concern, Commissioner Chorin?
Well, you're asking them to change what they have now to match what they're proposing.
Yeah, we thought the wood gate that they had proposed was going to look a lot better than what's existing out there, and just matching it for consistency would be the best bet.
Wouldn't consistency also be the new one matching the existing?
Correct, but the wood gate on the proposed one looks a lot cleaner and it screens a lot better than the metal gate that's on the existing one.
Is there a concern about visual? I mean, I believe it faces the freeway, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's to the rear of the site, pretty good, but if anybody was to ever go back there, or if it was to somehow be seen from the Port Washington Road, it would just look better if it would matched and had some sort of consistency.
I mean, I suspect this isn't a huge cost issue for them, but in some sense it seems kind of silly for them to throw away something they have that's been approved just so that the new one, so it matches what you're proposing. So
I had messaged with the agent before before the meeting, and they were pretty agreeable to the conditions, so.
Fair comment. I think the wood will help knock the sound down a little better than a gate, so it's probably better in the long run. Any other discussion on that item, or is there a motion? Oh, Commissioner Stoker.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further conversation? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that item's approved. Next up, we'll take up Plunkett Rayish Architects for Lumen Christi. Applicant is seeking building and site plan amendment approval to allow for addition and renovation to the school property located at 11300 North St. James Place. Sure, that would be a good time if you want to recuse yourself. You can make it nice and clean. Commissioner Chorin's going to recuse himself on this vote. Any questions from the Planning Commission, or are we ready to make a motion? This was going to be on consent in theory and be pretty easy, but since we took them one at a time and someone needed to recuse themselves, well.
I think I'd like to just,
Commissioner Strelchak.
sorry, I think I'd just like to address the water issue formally and have staff comment on, you know, if we are truly a one-for-one replacement of non-impervious surfaces, I just, due to the concern in the neighborhood, I think it'd be good to just go over how you've analyzed that and, you know, how this recommendation is coming forward, and it should not impact any water issues. Or if there is concern, please highlight any concern you would have.
Yeah, the work is kind of highlighted on the overview sheet. You can kind of see sorry, I don't have it up on the screen or anything, but you can kind of see the boxes of their work areas, which are much larger than what's actually being added for hard surface, which is what our stormwater management ordinance is based on in this situation. So they're adding about 1,300 square feet of impervious surface. During their last approval process, when they did a larger addition, they had to go through, they basically had to meet much stricter flow rate criteria than most other places with most other developments, probably to address the nearby concerns. So what they have to do with even this small added area is meet those same criteria in the past ones. So they're going to prove that in and move forward.
Yeah, essentially all they're giving up is the 2 islands in the parking lot. Otherwise, they're building on top of what is otherwise asphalt.
And the bigger concern with the water runoff was on the far east side, right? Mainly with that, the church parking lot is where a lot of questions came in. As that water would flow north and east, I think towards those houses back there, that was the largest concern. And I think the water from this flows west into that ditch, correct?
They pretty much everywhere downstream of their hard surface on the site has a stormwater device now, so it would go into one of those devices before it left.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Second.
Motion and a second. Last call and comments, questions, hearing and seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that item's approved. Next on to Brookfield 16 LLC. Applicant is seeking a certified survey map to allow for a 2-lot land division for the property located at 3319 West Mequon Road. What a quick intro by staff. Jack, you got this one, or Evan?
So this is a 2-acre R3 zoning district lot as it stands. It'll be divided up into 2 1-acre lots respectively, with a 30-foot access easement on the west side of lot 1 going into lot 2. After talking with the architect, the average lot width and length meet the standard, and everything else with setbacks and right-of-way meets the standard as well. There are multiple specimen trees on the property that Mike Geese went out and looked at and met with the property owner. He's looking to preserve and save those, and just as a condition, we're just going to put in there that Mike Geese will have to sign off on any building permit or any other construction that's going to go on either of the lots.
So you need that added?
What was that?
I think that's covered by
Yeah,
item number 8. So we're good there.
That should wrap it up.
That's it?
Yep.
Pretty straightforward. Almost could have been on consent, maybe, if it weren't for some specimen trees, maybe. Any questions or comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Strelchak.
The lots to the east and the west look like they're 1 acre as well.
Yeah.
That was the only question I had, so that's perfect.
Nice and easy one.
Move approval
Motion and a second.
for staff conditions.
Thank you for that clarification. I assume the second also applies. Any other comments or questions from the planning commission? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that CSM is approved. Happy building. Next up is Concord Development Company for Concord 37. Applicant is seeking a minor approval for a master sign plan amendment for the properties located at 1300 through 1412 West Mequon Road.
I'll be
Take it
taking
away,
this
Jack.
one. So there are 3 basic amendments that they're requesting to the original master sign plan. I'm going to go through 1 and 3 and come back to 2. The first one I have on the screen, as you can see, this is the center. This is the Panera Center. It's way in the back. This tenant space right here, they're actually asking for an additional sign on the east elevation. Just to give you some context, this is basically the location of it. We do allow signs to have 2 signs of if they're abutting a public street, but this is not abutting a public street, so the closest is Port Washington Road, which is way back through here. This request was asked in 2013 as well. The commission did deny this, and we're actually recommending denial for this one as well. The third, I'm going to go to the third one first. The third request is to allow for, they have these signs that overhang underneath the canopy. These right here, they're asking for them to be of different colors. Based on the ownership's approval and staff supportive of, as long as the background is the same, and these right now is currently like a yellow. If that background remains the same, we're not concerned about the fonts changing in terms of the type of signage. So we don't want to actually see those on an individual basis as long as those backs remain as yellow, or if they want to change the backs, they need to be consistent with all the backs, and then that would have to get staff approval. We want to make sure it's consistent with the colors of the building. So that's 3. 2, there was a little bit of a mistake in my report, and I did speak with Colleen about it today, so I'll kind of go over it. It would have been a lot easier if I'd have known, if I'd have read it a little clearer. But so what happened was the code for this development does allow, which the same thing we were discussing in the report, is that they are allowed to have 1 sign over each tenant space regardless of the number of tenants. I missed that part of it. It doesn't change our recommendation. In fact, I think it would have been a lot easier instead of having this debate about how many signs we allow over vacant spots. It actually kind of makes it easier for us in terms of the denial of this request as well. So the request would be for this middle one, basically. So they would want a larger sign for the center one, and then have another sign located to the right that would have a different language on it. I asked them for a code compliant sign based on our 30 square foot requirement, which is shown on the top. The problem is, I don't think neither one of these actually are dimensioned properly to meet our code requirement. Our code requires the 30-foot smallest polygon, and neither one of them are to meet that requirement. The one that's code compliant is close, but not quite. This one actually is not. This one says it's 54 square feet for the larger one and 24 for the other one. If you took the smallest polygon around this thing, it would actually be smaller than that. So I think we're suggesting that this remain at 30 square feet, which wouldn't actually be that much smaller than what it's shown here. This sign, to be legal, would just not have to be a box sign. They could do a channel letter sign, and as long as it's 30 square feet, they're compliant with their master sign plan, which, again, we're supportive of because that's what the requirements are. We don't support having a larger sign, or basically what they want to do is say they have 30, 60, 90 square feet to use up, and they want to allocate however they wish, meeting a certain height requirement. So I don't think we want to go down that path just because we don't want a separate uniform height difference between the bigger signs and the smaller signs. So we're recommending that the sign plan remain in effect for this as well, which they can again do if they just change this to channel letter signs, and then this sign actually can be a little larger than what's shown. So the only proposal that we're accepting is a minor change to those blade signs, and everything else we're denying. If that makes sense. Sorry about the confusion in the report. I just missed the part where it says 17 tenant bay signs regardless of how many tenants there are. So, and I didn't remember that from 2013. Sorry, it's a long time ago.
Yeah, I think for that center sign, if it just shrunk just a little bit, it would meet the 30 square feet.
And I guess I would address that to say that the sign they're actually proposing is showing 14-inch channel letter signs, and the compliance sign says 12-inch. But this, again, the compliance sign, if you eliminate this training, nutrition, recovery box, which is roughly 4 square feet, and this sign shows only at 25 square feet, that puts you down to 21 square feet. I think they could easily get to 14 with the Anytime Fitness to match what's the one on below, and still be within that 30 square feet. So, I mean, they're not proposing 16-inch sign channel letters on the proposed sign as well. So I think we can get that. I think they can get to 14 easily, as long as they meet the 30 square feet, and then they do this one in channel letters, and they can increase that size by another 6 square feet. And I think we're all good to go in terms of the master sign plan.
I'm just doing some quick math here. It's dangerous to do on the fly, but if you had 16-inch letters and the little guy in the middle wasn't any taller than the letters, you could have a 22.5-foot wide sign, and that'd be exactly 30 square feet. You'd get your 16-inch letters, just a little guy in the middle. That's what's requirement for make it consistent and easy for staff to do with making it a uniform polygon is what's hurting you, because most of the spot that's being counted is blank, and that's just the way the code's written, so it's uniform.
Actually, this is not 53 square feet. The polygon, what you would do is, in our way we measure our sign codes, you would take this line and then you would drop down, go around this, go around, and then you would make the smallest polygon around it. They just basically took the size of the logo and went across.
If you do that's a 30 square foot sign right there.
Pretty close, yes,
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
I did some rough math
Yeah.
before I get 29.5 square feet. You can get 16 today if the little dude in the middle gets shorter, I think. Okay. The ratio, fellow space, yeah, that's branding, I get it, but okay. I think the sign that's there now that's compliant. It's probably under 30 square feet.
It's pretty close, correct?
Yeah.
And I think we would, well, again, be consistent with that. I mean, I had a long couple paragraphs in the report about our previous responses to master sign plans and these tenant spaces, which technically isn't applicable here because we've already approved it, but we've had this issue come up on numerous other developments. It all started years ago with the Learning Shop, where we let them have 3 signs, and we kind of have this slippery slope of either allowing that, or we allow, like, I have a picture in the report of the impression signs, which takes up 3 bays. I think from our end of it, I think in the future, we'll definitely have to do a better job when we do have an applicant come in for a conditional use or a permitted use that's taking up more than 1 base, to be more cognizant of this issue. I think in this case, definitely would have required the door to be in the center looking back on it instead of to being over here. It just makes more sense. And we didn't really review that at the time because we weren't looking at signage, but I think for our end, we'll have to do a better job at that. But again, I don't want to go on this slippery slope of allowing exceptions for each little change that, a tenant makes at a building. So I think the 30 square foot requirement is in place, and I think it can work in terms of wayfinding and advertising pretty well within the confines of the space that they have.
But it's 3 30-foot signs, the way it's written in the code, so it's... Commissioner Strelchak.
I hear you loud and clear. I worked in corporate branding and signage for close to 20 years, so I understand what you're saying. You're asking for 2 things, and you're combining the best of both worlds to benefit your tenant, which is great. Good for you for advocating for them. If you wanted the larger channel letters on the sign, you could reduce the fitness man icon to match, and then that would hit in with your larger lettering and everything else. But you're sharing that that's corporate branding. It's not the city of Mequon's fault that corporate branding has a taller logo in the middle. If they go to get laser engraved pens or an imprint on a pen, they're either A, going to need to alter their logo to fit the space available. They show stacked Anytime Fitness and then the fitness guy off to the left on the website. So they've already got 2 different versions of the logo under the corporate accepted brand guide, right? Which I'm supportive of. What I like to see within a city, though, is I really like to see that we're consistent in legislation, and we're consistent with not picking favorites. You're currently allowed, 3 30 square foot signs for the tenant spaces. I don't support the combining all the square footage and you use it how you want on a space. If they reduce their space size for any reason in the future, which I'm not anticipating they will, and you're sharing it's a 10-year lease. But after that 10 years or after a portion of time, if they choose to downsize a little bit, and they go to 2 out of the 3 spaces to keep with their signage there, and that other space goes vacant, what does the city of Mequon do? Do we come back to you to replace the sign at your expense? Or do we go to the tenant and impose a hardship on the tenant to reduce the sign to come into compliance as a new tenant wants to move in? When we legislate here as a city level, we try to be as consistent as possible, as fair and as equitable as possible, and we try not to make this into an art show. And that's the biggest frustration that I had when I got elected, is that things seem to go along the art show way. We were kind of feeling like we were picking favorites in some cases. And ever since I came on board, the mayors have made a really strong point of making sure that didn't happen moving forward. I think in this case, if you look deep and you kind of understand 30 square feet of signage space per tenant space is within compliance within the city code. There's examples of it elsewhere in the city. You're not facing the street. It's not a corner, space like Panera where you're quoting one's larger, one's smaller. That's a different situation because they were the corner and your anchor tenant facing the street. So there was an exception that was made there, and that's my assumption as to why that was. But in this space, I really just don't, I don't support deviating from that size. It just, people are going to know Anytime Fitness is there. They're not going to see the logo any differently. If you reduce the exercise man icon in the middle and you had the channel lettering that size, I don't think corporate branding would really object to it, from a standpoint. Yeah, they definitely prefer to have it larger, but I don't think it impacts them long term as to whether a customer is going to walk into that door or not. They're going to have the same amount of customers. And once they're in your facility, and I've shopped there frequently, I've spent pretty good money in your facility over the years. Once you're in, you get reminded of everybody that's there by seeing all the signs and consistency, going down the line. So I don't know that for what you're asking for is going to make a big difference long term to your tenant. But it does deviate from standards that are easy to refer back to and be consistent with from a planning commission and a city standpoint moving forward. That also being said, I do have one question. We're requesting that the blade signs are going to be kept yellow. Do you know what material those are?
No, I do not know what they, it looks like a wooden material, but I'm not 100% sure.
Is it a wood painted material?
Colleen might know better, yeah.
So unless you're going to have a wood painted material that you're going to take back to blank and that you're going to do it in an oil-based substrate and put vinyl letters on it, there's no other way that I'm aware of that, unless you print on it or do something, that you're going to really get that same consistent color in the background.
Yeah.
So you just want color on those if possible? Is that was the goal? Color logos. Yeah, it's acceptable to me by all means.
I have a question for staff. I saw it in here earlier, but I can't seem to find it now. The height of the banner that goes around the building where the signs are located. Pardon? Okay. I see a potential problem, and I'm not sure how to. The problem with the request you're making. If that ratio of the text height to the ratio of the dude in the middle is fixed at 2-to-1, which appears to be from the graphic here, the dude's already at the maximum height of that banner. If you get 16-inch letters and 40 square feet, the sign is going to be nearly 30 feet long in length, which is another 30. It's another third again as long. And the guy's going to be over 28 inches tall. He's going to go off the banner where the sign can even be mounted. So it seems a little problematic. We don't have it sitting here in front of us, but if that guy's already at his maximum height and he's the same width as the banner, he's going to come off the edges. He's going to look a little odd compared to the rest of the signage on the site. It'll go down onto the brick or go way up into I assume that's siding above the strip where the sign goes. I don't know about everyone here, but it's tough to make a decision on the fly we could always table that and entertain it again in the future. That would allow us to have some of the details figured out. Because if we say 40 feet and 16 inches, we're going to come back, we're going to get a 30-foot long sign, and someone's going to be unhappy, and there's no way for any of us to visualize it. I mean, I can. Sure.
Yeah, and as we're calculating this, it's important for me to see that that sign's maintained within the width of those brick columns and not extend beyond that. So like, if you ask for something that extends beyond that, I can be flexible at times. It's just a hard no vote for me on that, so you'll lose one there. Yep.
Any thoughts from the commission on that? It's Commissioner Strelchak.
I think if you come to us with a tenant, we'd entertain it, but again, you're facing a parking lot, so unless you're going to appeal to people in a drive-through, and that's going to add enough visual volume to a retail location, it sounds sexy and it's good for discussion and marketing to get somebody in the space, but I don't know that it does anything for the business in that case.
Commissioner Chorin?
So what I hear is the possibility of tabling all of it, or
I think there's consensus, I think, on item 3. Yeah.
well, item
went- we-
1 and 3, right?
Uh,
The east elevation and the blade signs. What numbers were those?
Staff was not supportive of number 1, which we just talked about, so their motion as written is just to do number 3. And then number 2, probably going to table because there's nothing to even, in the packet to even talk about because it's not technically correct.
Let's make it easy. A move to table item number 2 and go per staff's recommendations on the other ones.
There is a motion. We can continue to debate it, or is there a second? We can still continue to debate it after we have a motion. Do we want to take them up individually? Is that easier for people? Let's take them up individually. So, on the topic of Amendment 1 for the sign to the parking lot, facing the parking lot, is there a motion on just that item?
Move to deny.
Second.
Any further comments or discussion? Oh, sorry, there's a motion to deny Amendment 1. Seeing none, all those in favor of denying, so yes to vote no, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item 1's denied, or Amendment 1. Amendment 2, is there a motion on Amendment 2? Amendment 2 is the discussion on the 30 versus 40 versus letter height.
Is there, I guess my question is there value? There's 2 ways we can work it. One, we can table it. The other one, we can approve as shown with the 30, with the
Well,
option of an,
I don't think we're not totally compliant at what's shown.
I think you
It's
have
a
2
30. If it
options.
meets the 30, then we don't need to approve it at all.
Yeah, I think you have 2 options, just to either approve it per staff's recommendations, which would allow them to have the 30 square feet, or you table that one portion of it and let them have an opportunity to come back at a later date. And even that 30 square feet sign will get bigger because again, that includes that little training, nutrition. So it'll be bigger than that. But if you don't want to entertain that, you can just approve it at staff level and it will remain at 30 square feet per their existing master sign plan, or you can table that portion and let them have an opportunity to come back and plead their case for a different sign.
Even if we table it, they can still do 30 feet, correct?
Right, correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so we're just leaving the door open to do something different, but they can
Yeah.
still do what's written in the code.
If you approve it per staff's recommendations and it gets approved that way, then they'd have to wait 3 months or whatever it is to come back and ask for the same thing again. If you table it, then they have the ability to come back at it next month if they want to. So those
Then
are
the most favorable thing we could do is table it.
table
yeah.
that portion of it.
All right.
Motion to table it?
Second.
Motion and a second. Motion to table is non-debatable, so sorry, everyone. All those in favor of tabling, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that's tabled. Can still do 30 feet, but if there's something magic that works out that's a little bit more, I guess we're leaving a foot in the door. Okay, now we're down to the third amendment, and I don't think this sounded pretty cool, and I don't think anyone's in a disagreement, but I could be wrong. I'll open it up for comment from the commissioners.
Blade sign, I'd move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just want to make sure that's per staff recommendation.
For staff recommendations, yes, for Amendment 3. Thank you for that. Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Amendment 3 is approved per staff recommendations. Thank you. Maybe we'll see you in a month or two when work with the sign contractors. Good luck. Well, I think that's all wrapped up in part 2, so we'll see again. Yeah, we'll see him again, I'm sure.
My pages.
Lastly, we have, under regular business, Sign Effects Incorporated for Landmark Credit Union. The applicant is seeking a minor request approval for a sign waiver allowing electronic menu board sign for the property located at 10865 North Port Washington Road.
So applicant is seeking minor request for sign waiver for electronic message board sign. These would be replacing some of the plastic inserts that advertise interest rates or other products available to the customers. They would be placed in the drive-through areas you see here, which are at the rear of the site on Port Washington Road. Landmark submitted a statement of hardship that claimed that not having these would hinder the ability to offer consistent experience for customers. Staff thought that alternatives like window decals or even window signs would be an alternative that could provide that consistent experience by allowing them to advertise these things to customers in the drive-through. This would violate a couple ordinances, which would be if they were to do multiple of these, having more than one wall sign on a facade, and these are also not allowed in the zoning district B2, and wouldn't be allowed for the use either. They're not allowed for financial institutions across the city as well. Because of this, staff recommends denial of the sign waiver.
Thank you. Open it up for comments from the commissioners. Commissioner Strelchak.
Can we just hear from the applicant? Because obviously they disagree with what staff said.
If we've got
I got a
comments or
comment after.
questions, sure, we can do that. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, if it's green, you can hear you, and then you might have to get uncomfortably close to it.
All right. This, in our opinion, isn't really an electronic message center. Electronic message center is something like you'd have out in front of the school with all the copy for traffic pattern going by, announcing whatever the school might do. This is just an electric poster board is all it is. They're gonna have their CD rates, their bank rates, therefore solely just the people in line at the drive-through. It's not going to be flashing all kinds of stuff. It's going to be pretty much a static board that they can change from the corporate level, not being changed from the bank itself. It's not going to have multiple screens going by, from everything they're telling me. We're doing these at all the landmark stores. Yes, we have a few other communities that have the same thoughts. This isn't visible to the general public, is I guess what I'm trying to say. It's the same thing as a menu board at McDonald's or a pre-menu board at any other drive-through. Quick Trip, you'd pull up to the gas pump and you have this blasting video going on at every pump. This is nothing like that. This is just a static board. Yes, it's a TV and it's electronic, but it's not a message center. I guess that's my argument.
All right, thank you. Any comments or questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Chorin?
Can staff reiterate what their concern is again?
This is just something that's not allowed in the code either as it exists, and I think you might remember last month that Brian, the city attorney, came with a revised sign code, and it wouldn't be allowed in there either for these zoning districts.
So this would be a case of another slippery slope, right?
I don't think it's addressed in the code. You know, like I said, it's not like the sign out in the front that says Landmark Credit Union with a big flashing message in front of it. It's in the back of the building. It's not the same thing as an electronic message sign.
If it's not addressed in the code, though, that's deemed to be prohibited.
That is the way the code generally works. If it's not addressed, then it's not allowed. But I know there was, when our electronic sign ordinance was amended a few years ago to allow such things like the high school message boards and our community board, there was a concerted effort at the time to not promote a bunch of creep for such things. Now, I'm not sure the applicant actually brings up a couple good instances. Like over that same time, we've seen gas stations sort of have their way with that. When they change the screen that shows you the price, they jam commercials at you for 30 seconds, and I'm always quick to find the third button down on the right-hand side, which is the mute button. Even if it's not marked, that'll mute it. Tips and tricks for people watching at home. But has this changed? This is another good point that the applicant actually brought up. Has establishments like McDonald's actually changed they used to be static plastic signs, but do they actually have these in back? I guess I don't know the answer to because I don't go to McDonald's in Mequon anymore, but my kids have grown up, so I don't go there anymore. And maybe you don't know the answer, but it doesn't mean we have to approve them. It's just maybe something we should be aware of. They might be popping up naturally. And maybe we would have to end up addressing them somehow.
I think anywhere with a drive-through and a menu has an electronic board. Starbucks does, Arby's, because they show you your order as you order it. Culver's.
So these are already becoming commonplace. Potentially. Commissioner Strelchak.
I'd really like to address it in the code. So we got two choices from what I'm seeing is, we could table this one with the intent to review the code in the next X amount of days, just to address this one issue, or, as the ordinance sits right now, I'm not comfortable approving it, because once we say yes to this does open Pandora's box for anybody and everybody in that zoning district, regardless of type of business, to do the same.
It sounds like that maybe the cat's getting out of the bag with these, and a few may actually exist in Mequon, despite there being a policy of not really approving them.
Well, the code also says, though, the electronic display screen background shall be black. None of those menu boards are black backgrounds. They're all white.
They're all backlit or white with black lettering.
This also says that it has to be, shall only be permitted as a freestanding ground sign, which this one would not be. I mean, it's kind of all over.
Well, the code's written around a traditional message board sign, like the one we have in the corner and the ones the schools all put in, but the other incarnations of electronic signs aren't addressed anywhere in the code, which, to Jack's point, it says quite clearly in our code, if it's not addressed, then it's not permitted. And that's how we've traditionally enforced it. It feels like maybe we need to do some research on our end. And
Yeah,
we
can
might
look
need
at
a
it from-
policy on this,
from a
because
policy issue. I
like
think that
I'm
makes sense.
becoming aware just throughout the conversation here that some of these exist and maybe they don't exist legally per the code, but
Yeah, I think the ones that do exist probably exist within a bigger cabinet of some other information. I don't know, I don't go to drive-thrus very often either, but I think we can look at it and we could make some distinctions on some of that, but it's gonna take a few months for it to be addressed as a policy.
even if you had all the answers tomorrow, it would take 3 months to get it through council.
Yeah, correct.
That's just the way the process works. There's a committee meeting, a first reading, and a second reading, and then a vote if everything's totally smooth. Any further comments? Commissioner Schaefer?
Would this get added then to what what Brian, would this get added to what's already in process?
It would have
With
to be,
council.
well, it would come as a separate standalone amendment, but it would be an amendment to what was already recently
Yeah.
approved, yes.
We wouldn't slow all that up for this, but
No.
Council didn't approve it
we'd
yet,
tack it on at the end.
right? Because that was just last month that we talked about
Yeah,
this.
what planning commission approved, it would be just
Yeah.
another amendment to that.
I didn't know if maybe you would just hold.
Well, we
No, I
we
think
don't want to hold that
No,
one.
I think we can handle them separately. They don't have to be, they're not necessarily tied together.
One was more a wholesale rewrite, and this is really a spot issue that's come to our attention in an unusual way. Maybe it's not that unusual.
If I may comment, I mean, every menu board at any drive-through is going to be, if it is not already, a digital board. That we're putting them in every McDonald's, every Burger King. I mean, they're all going to digital. That's where we're at. We're not those static little boards that are all
That's true.
crazy, because McDonald's, they change their menu from breakfast to lunch to dinner, or whatever restaurant it is. This is the same thing as what that is. It's in the back of the building. It's for the drive-through customers only. Same thing as McDonald's. McDonald's will have a pre-menu board. If you say you don't go there very often, but usually as you're in line, there's a board that tells you some of their main specials, and then the next board is all their food.
Yeah, I can see the similarities. I think the troubling part is we don't have anything in the code that allows it, therefore it's not technically allowed, but I think we're going to have to deal with this issue regardless. I'm confident they're popping up all over the place. Commissioner Chorn,
Well, Jack, what was approved at Arbery, since that's the newest, closest? I mean, any clue what they've got there?
I don't recall offhand, but we did have to approve the conditional use, which I think it had the menu board as part of that. So and I guess I think, again, without getting to some policy analysis on this, I think there's a distinction, at least in my mind, between when you're in line for a drive-through looking for information on what you're purchasing versus going to a bank and all of a sudden looking at CD rates. I don't think that's why you're at the bank. You're at a McDonald's to order food, or Arby's to order food, and you need to know what they have available and the price. This, to me, is a little bit different, and that's where maybe the policy will come down on, is that we may be tolerable to these things for uses where you're actually there ordering something and you need to know what the prices are versus to me, is just advertising. Because 90%, I'm assuming 90% of people going through the drive-through at a bank are going there to do a deposit or withdrawal or something. They're not there to find out what CD rates are or any other investment opportunities are.
Commissioner Strelchuk.
I'm also going to highlight that every single example that we gave tonight, commissioners and the applicant included, were restaurant-based. None of them were financial institutions. A month or so ago, we denied, I think it was M&I Bank, they wanted that lettering inside of their window. BMO. Sorry, BMO, yep. And, this would have applied to them as well. I think as we address the issue, of these boards, it might be, drive-through contained visibility only. It might be limited to certain types of establishments. It might not be extended to financial. It may be. We don't know. But
Well, it's clear from discussion we need a policy. I don't think we're going to write it tonight, unfortunately.
do you need a table?
we can certainly table it, and that would enable it to come back at any time, but I think we're tabling pending further review by public welfare and the council. Or just planning commission.
Probably, I don't know, there's a certain requirement, I think this would go to planning commission for a review.
Yeah, it's chapter 58.
Well, no, it's science, so it's 62, but
Okay.
it'll still go to planning
Still
commission.
go to planning commission. I think we may need to create a policy. Was that a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to table so that we can get into further policy discussion to see if this is something that we'd be willing to allow to every establishment in the city of Mequon that fits certain criteria.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to table. It's a non-debatable motion again. All those in favor of tabling, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, unfortunately, we'll probably see you again on this item in a few months. I would just ask that staff keep the applicant informed of the process. It may take a while. We make glaciers look fast here sometimes. We'll try not to drag our heels because it sounds like this one's out of the box a little bit. We may need to create a policy, and we'll have a few I'll have to deal with the ones that exist already. But thank you for your patience, and we'll be in touch. That brings us to the policy portion of the evening. Changes to Chapter 58 and Chapter 10 as it relates to the responsibilities of the Architectural Review Board and guidelines for residential structures.
Yes, this came out of a study done by Management Partners several years ago with regard to streamlining process in our department. One of the things they mentioned was our Architectural Review Board process is a little bit cumbersome at times and maybe unclear. So this has been through, the Architectural Board has seen this. It's been a public welfare several times. But since this is in Chapter 58, it requires Planning Commission recommendation as well. So after it goes through Planning Commission, whatever your recommendation is, then it would go on to Public Welfare, I think, for a final reading, and then on to Common Council for final approval. So what we did here with regard to the Architectural Review Board, and this is kind of some tentacles, because it goes into Chapter 10, which is our building code. It goes into a couple different sections of Chapter 58, but I'll try to summarize the best I can. One of the main things we did was change what staff can review at a staff level basis for detached structures. Right now, we review things that are 150 square feet or less in area. This change would bring it up to 300 square feet in area, provided that no one length is 18 feet in length. So basically, we wanted to have the ability to review sheds on properties that were under 300 square feet and not send them to the Architectural Review Board. We also made changes to the detached structure requirements regarding roof pitch and things like that, so we don't want to have, in the past, if people had a full brick house with a 12 pitch roof, they wanted the detached building to match that exactly, and then a lot of people don't want to spend $40,000 on a shed, but they felt that they were kind of hamstrung by the actual ordinance, so we're changing that to give them flexibility with these structures. Other things we're changing is we're allowing flexibility for materials on additions to existing buildings, but that may not have the available product anymore. If you have brick on your house that you can't find anymore, we don't want to try to match it as best as possible. So we're giving them flexibility to let the architects kind of figure out what the best material approach is for that type of application. We're also eliminating the requirement that if picture windows and patio doors do not have to have grids to match the rest of the house, if the rest of the house have grids. That's been a sore spot at Architectural Review Board for a while. They were enforcing patio doors, sliding patio doors to have a grid if you had a grid in your double hung windows, which didn't seem to make a lot of sense, but again, they were pushing the consistency model. We actually removed the requirement that was added by our former mayor when he changed the animal code. We had a requirement that our Architectural Review Board would review agricultural buildings less than 1,000 square feet. That was kind of thrown in there because no one was really reviewing them. So he thought, I think at the time, that it was better for the Architectural Review Board. Our Public Welfare thought it's better for staff to review those. So anything less than 1,000 square feet for ag buildings would be reviewed at staff. Anything over 1,000 square feet would come to this body. The track changes are in the packet. I don't know if you looked at any of that. There's a couple different colors. You see all different rainbow colors. Those are different people's opinions and what they added and subtracted. So it was hard to kind of clean it up once the comments were made. But this would be the final version, based on different opinions from different staff members and the Public Welfare Committee. So if you have any questions or modifications that you want to make, just let us know, and we'll be happy to hear.
Commissioner Schaefer.
How much additional work is this for staff versus the Architectural Review Board? Is it actually better for you? Kim?
Remains to be seen. I think that you might end up having some circumstances where someone has a 250 square foot shed that is totally not in keeping with the property, that we may have to go back and forth several times, and then if we can't come to an agreement, it may end up going to the board anyway. So, but I think 80 to 90% should be pretty straightforward. Then those will be those 20% that may take a lot of extra time to it. So.
Like everything, okay.
Yeah, the intent is to try to streamline it, and there'll be the inevitable disagreement here or there, which we'll just go to the board to resolve that, but it's intended to be a little more flexible for the people coming through the door to get help with these minor requests, and try and declutter the agenda as much as possible, and keep our board focused on bigger fish and not so much the small ones. So this one's been in the hopper for almost a couple of years now. It's nice to
Been going
see it
back
come
and forth
forward.
several
Yep.
times.
Yep. Commissioner Jensis. Well, we'll let you go first. You haven't got to speak all night.
I was just going to add the comment that I like the idea of, even though it may mean more work for staff, I think this seems to be the realm that you guys are the proper experts, and it makes sense to have these decisions delegated to staff versus going to the Architectural Control Board. So,
And I think the other thing that I think is helpful is that for some reason, some people don't want to go to the Architectural Review Board. Maybe it's time, or they just don't want to have the additional layer of bureaucracy. But we've seen a lot of 12 by 12 sheds in the past, or whatever, to get it as close as the 150 as possible. So, and even though I know they want bigger, they're not asking for it. So now at least they're allowed to have a little bit bigger building without having to go through that process. So I think that's helpful.
You're going to see lots of 12 by 24 structures. Commissioner Strelchak.
I don't remember, but what I do want to do is protect staff a little bit. As these things are going to staff for staff approval, we should have a clear call out that, at staff's discretion, or if an agreement can't be met between the applicant and staff, that it goes to ARC board. And then it just gets voted on, and, that can be handled. I know that's in place, just kind of mentally that's how it works anyway, but I've also heard you guys get beat up pretty bad when somebody has a differing opinion than what yours is, and they come at you with 7 different ways on why they're right, and this just gives you the opportunity to listen, try to be as collaborative as you can, but then also say, okay, we've discussed this, here's what we support. If that doesn't work for you, we can send it to the ARC board, make sure that meets their approval, and if it does, then we can approve it there. I know some planning commission items have come forward here a couple times, just because you've been in a spot where you're just not comfortable making a staff decision on something because it's close, right?
Yeah, usually it's something that we just don't want to be on record as precedent setting. If somebody comes in with a shed and it's got a flat roof and it's metal construction, and a house is, brick or something, and it's not in a subdivision or association where they'd have no control, that we may be not comfortable with. But I think, like I said, 85% of them I think we can get there on. So, yeah, we'll have that channel available for them if we can't come to an agreement. So I think it'll be beneficial for staff and the residents as well.
You're not going to get your 300 square foot Quonset hut anytime soon.
Been working on it.
Commissioner Urbani.
Maybe I should have waited a few more years to build my 200 square foot shed that's barely big enough, but I'm happy to see a little more flexibility for residents.
Any other feedback? Must have been a good job. It makes sense, too. Perfect. Well, I think Commissioner Strelchak maybe gave you the one piece of feedback to put a little protective type language in there to cover staff, but
Okay.
other than that, good job, and everyone's happy. We can entertain a motion to
You need a
adjourn.
formal recommendation?
Do we, or we're just
We
reviewing
need
it?
a formal recommendation
Okay.
of the stuff that's,
Well, let's-
there is stuff that's outside of 58, but it's all bundled together, but the stuff in 58 you need to actually formally
Okay.
recommend.
I'll move to recommend with my one revision to the additional governing bodies.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further conversation? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's formally recommended. There's one last motion to have here. Motion to adjourn. Second. Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.